Welcome back to part 2 of the panel discussion, Catholic Social Doctrine and the Preferential Option for the Poor. We will now be entertaining questions from the audience and discussions on the panelists on what they had shared. Okay. We have a question at the back there.
Okay. I was saying that I was very impressed with the contributions by the panelists. But I want to focus on the one done by Ms. Hyacinth. And in explaining the 7 principles, she spoke about religious poverty under the caption Preferential Option for the Poor. I don't quite understand this one, so could you just expatiate on that a little bit? And secondly, in talking about the role of the church in the past and where the church would like to go, perhaps Mr. St. Hill can give us some more information or enlighten us on the role of the youth with respect to what transpired in the past, and whether you see youth becoming more involved in the current situation and beyond. And finally, during my discussions last Saturday on the whole question of examples of poverty reduction initiatives, I was trying to make the point that the church needs to identify specific entry points. Obviously, it will have to be on a phase basis, immediate, medium term, long term, etc. But what are the key entry points that the church would like to engage in this time, given all of the challenges that we have in society, and given the fact that our young people need to be brought into the picture?
I mentioned about different theories. I spoke about the church's love for the poor, which is inspired by the gospel, by the Beatitudes, by the poverty of Jesus, and by his attention to the poor. And this kind of love concerns material poverty and also the various forms of cultural and religious poverty.
Within our society as St. Lucian people, we realize that we have experienced cultural poverty, deprived of certain aspects of our culture, who we are. We struggle a lot to accept ourselves, accept the Creole language, accept the way we were brought up and so on. And now I think we are suffering the repercussions of some of the things that we have rejected in the past, which are cultural. Religious as well, in terms of understanding who we are. Okay, we were introduced to the Catholic Church. We were being converted, but at the same time, even before that, those persons who came in, they had their own form of religion. It did not give people a chance to probably understand who they are, and were pushed into accepting something that was foreign to you. It may be good, it might be good, we may be experiencing goodness, but at the same time, what we first knew was, we were taught to reject it. And so it created some kind of depravity in us, some void that is probably we are struggling with to accept what we have been taught. So this is my understanding of the kind of poverty that we have created, that is created over the past years. And we need to help people come to an understanding of who they are, accepting what they have been, and then to come to an understanding of what it is that has been passed on to them. I don't know if I'm more confusing you than anything else.
I'll just ask Deacon Popo if he wants to add anything in terms of the religious poverty.
Right, thank you, Mark. Sometimes we, sometimes we can mix up the terms like religious and or spiritual poverty. But I think that I'm more apt to speak of spiritual poverty. One can talk about religious poverty, but as I was saying earlier, historically we have had that tension and still now between what comes first. And any student of philosophy will tell you that, is it matter or is it spirit? But I just want to go back to Ezra, what you had in the 4th lecture series, where you had given us an idea in terms of the shift from a unilateral approach to poverty reduction, addressing poverty issues, as opposed to a multi-dimensional approach, in terms of addressing poverty. And you had given us that lecture, you had shown us the various ways so that we can address issues in a way that is more integrated. So I suspect that that because one of the things in the Catholic social doctrine, both prior to Vatican II, and as I was saying, that when, for example, in Populorum Progressio, when the question was posed that perhaps labor becomes the social question. Now, the church teaches that you really cannot buy labor, because the labor is from within. So you cannot buy it. That's a spiritual aspect. But how we, and that comes out through the subsequent exhortations and documents by up to Vatican II, and also as well, I think it was Kingsley who spoke about the rich man and the poor man, Lazarus and the rich man, that for us in terms of the mission of the church, which is to evangelize, and that is why both in St. Matthew talks about the poor in spirit, and Luke, as a medical doctor, talks about the poor, because he met with a number of people who are just poor, So for us as church, the church brings into the whole addressing of poverty another dimension, and to assert that the human being is not just somebody who's material, right? I mean, there is material deprivation, but even a poor person as well can be spiritually poor, and therefore bring to the front some of these evangelical objectives in terms of what is meant by evangelization. So that when Kingsley spoke about what the church has done during the period of the FMIs, the missionary church, and other organizations within the archdiocese, we have to look at it in a particular context, and that was a context where institutions give handouts, right? Did that really transform those persons? Did it really empower them? Was the question which arose especially in the 70s. In the 70s, that development decade, where both the developed world and the developing countries are saying, okay, you can give handouts, but people can still be within an enslaved mode, subjugated. That is spiritual poverty. So you're creating spiritual poverty by what you do in terms of addressing poverty. So I don't know if these couple of examples, as I say that I'm a little, because religion is about institution. Spiritual poverty cuts across any culture, any society. Yeah?
Okay, thank you. I will just invite Inch is okay, right?
Yeah.
I'll invite Inch to respond to the section of the question which was, how did you see the role of youth back then, and how you see the role of youth becoming involved? That was the question, the role of youth, the young people.
The role of youth will always be the role of youth. This morning I was so fortunate to meet a 34-year-old cousin of my nephew who wants to be a priest. And I said to him, I wanted to be a priest. I used to say Mass every Saturday morning in my mother's yard with all the neighbors' children. The only thing I could not say was when the priest was doing the consecration, the Latin part, and I said, shh, 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 shh. So if you had my 50th birthday, that is what my friends would say about me. But unfortunately, I left Beaufort and I came to Castries. And as my mother said, the Castries girls fooled me. And then, so I said to him around this morning, don't let them fool you. That's the highest vocation. The priesthood is the highest in my mind. But to cut it short, I don't think we have the CYOs anymore. I don't think the churches use the halls, the parish halls, as facilities for young people to play, to meet and recreate. If you listen to the first lecture of Father John, what the guys were saying, this guy from Waterworks Road, Father John had them to be in concerts. That's what the guys in Beaufort said. Per John, he was there for us. I remember taking part in concerts in primary school, thanks to Father John. That is part of the role of the church. Every year, every parish had concerts. So the Mass was not where you have your concert. The Mass was a Mass, and then the priest, that priest was the manager of the schools, and everything else would organize concerts for the choirs. But I must say, I have taken solace in hearing our choirs sing, our young people. I watch them every year. The young people have their retreats, etc. Right? I watch that. I send my children to the youth retreats. I did that. So, what they will do is what I hope Catholic parents like myself will give them that foundation. Because once you have that foundation, don't lose it. You could be like me. I could go all the way, everywhere. I still come back because I have that foundation. That is my hope. So young people could always come back. But we, as church, and the first church, Ezra, is the home. We, the church, that is the home, the domestic church, must give our children that foundation. So no matter what happened, they could come back and fall into it. That is my hope. Thanks. I answer you?
Yeah. I think it is. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking of youth as a collective. I understand your explanation from an institutional point of view, meaning that we are part of the family, the household, etc. That's fine. But there's a movement happening among our young people nowadays. More crime, and it could come up with a very long list. So the question for me is, I really wanted to get a glimpse of what youth as a collective was in your time when you were a young person, as against youth as a collective in this time. And I'm sure there are many changes that have transpired. And what exactly is the church doing in order to bring youth as a collective in line with all of these principles that were explained?
Ezra, honestly, I wish I had the answer for that. Again, I could all talk about my experience. This morning I was saying to a young man, my mechanic, he has my car, he booked on it. And I said to him, at my age, next week I'll be 69 years. My elder sister coming T-boy. And I said there's nothing wrong with that. As the last of my mother's 9 children, we said T-boy. All of them older than me. I was socialized that they did not mean nothing. And I explained to him that you are young, but in life, all your elder brothers, their friends will see you as their little brother. Your friends will see them as your big brothers. But sometimes I think the children now they're drinking acid, right? Because any little thing you have rights, etc. We must understand when people, I don't know. The way I said is that, in my experience, I explained to my children. The people who talked to me as a child, boy, go home. They did it out of love. There's no malice. When you do reflective writing, you could write and say, that person that tell me not to go there, right? They meant well. One of the best stories I've heard is from Father Cleo. Father Cleo gives a story about his father in Cicero, who was talking to him all the while. And he said, afterwards he realized when he became a priest that his father was telling him not to go with those boys, and he checked them. Most of them were into evil, wrong things. Right? So you do that reflection and realize that the people I say talk to you, people like the Tibai, boy, don't do that. They did it out of love. So therefore, love is not giving you everything you want. Love is wanting your salvation, teaching you the right, the truth. You must speak truth to power. Speak truth to our children. Tell them your experience. And one of the problems I find, honestly, in our, listen to young people, the storytelling, which is an African way of teaching, we miss it. We don't tell our children about our father, our grandfather, etc., these stories. All right? Papa is at the back. Should have listened to Papa's eulogy for his Uncle Jack. That is when you're staying by his mother, grandmother, all of them in the yard, everybody ate from the grandmother plate. That is the storytelling. Right? Love for family, love for cousins, for friends. When we don't tell our children, they believe everything is new. No, there's nothing new under the sun. We as, especially adults, have to practice to have storytelling. Tell our children our stories, that when they encounter it, that's not the first, they understand, but no, you're not the first to have COPD, you're not the first to have typhoid, you're not the first to have sexual transmitted disease, you're not the first that will fall, you're not the first somebody give you jokes, right? That has happened. Our children live in a world like in a silo, as if nothing bad's supposed to happen to them. No, the real world is what Christ showing us, right? That there are vipers and hypocrites out there. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Be wise as serpents, but gentle as doves. Our children may be wise, but they're not gentle. We need to explain that to them, what it means to be gentle as doves. And and you could see it, those persons like you who understand that, they've been successful in life. Many of us, look around us, were poor. From Bapatat, where I grew up in St. Mary's College, from Masha, from Rosehill. They are now successful lawyers. Papa came from Rosehill, right? Successful priests, you know what I mean? Theo came from Foligua, I could just name them, right? They were teachers and lawyers, etc. Poor people, you know, right? Sometimes part of the discussion I've had with my friend is that, you know, we were poor. When you were growing up, we were poor, but we were not hungry. And now you realize, but you know we were poor. Your mother had to do 3 jobs. You know why people had to do 3 jobs? Because to feed you. We were poor, but we grew up. And that, you know, we had something to look forward to. We saw our mentors, was the priest, was that one, etc. And we went, some of us like you, we went to further our studies to become middle class, etc. That education would help us. That financial institutions, the credit unions help us. You know, these are what help us, and that is what will help the young people.
Thank you, Inch. I think in response to the question also, I think it was what was posed in the last week's lecture, and it's something for us to ponder further on, that the time is different. The 60s and 70s is not 2023, and as church, we need to sit down and discuss ways of how do we address the needs of the young people today. And in truth and in fact, we may not necessarily need to reinvent the wheels. We may have to have new strategies, but as Inch said, some of those things which worked in the past can continue to work in the past. And I strongly believe in this thing about telling your children about your growing up, because I'm growing up with just radio and television, and the kinds of technology which those students are seeing now is a wide way. So sharing with them our stories, I think, is one of those ways. But as church, and I really want our audience to keep that in mind, as church, we have to discuss and ponder, reflect, and pray about how do we meet the needs of the youth today, because the youth today are under tremendous pressure with the crime, the drugs, and other things which they face. And Marylin wanted to share something.
Yeah. As Kingsley mentioned about telling stories, I mean, I'm remembering Folk Research Center and Journée Creole and Creole Heritage Month. And one of the activities that has been held is games, the Creole games, we call it jouet. And in the community, one of the communities that held the games for, the Creole Heritage Month games, the communities came out in large numbers. And one of the things that was happening, the young men, the old men were involved in playing tiki-talk, in sauteing cord, in doing all of these things that they once did, and the children were around participating. And one of the things I was thinking of Grosley, I really want to happen in Grosley, is to be able to organize a storytelling night, but not just a night, but to bring the elderly people from the community to just tell the stories of Grosley, tell the stories of the community, what it is that they have experienced, and to bring the other communities together. And this could be one way of replacing, letting our young people know the stories. The families might not be able to share it within their families, but if it is organized in such a way that the community is invited to a storytelling session, and not just one, two, you bring people and you involve all these traditional games and other little things that are part of it. Instead of, before we used to have a lot of blockoramas. Now you don't hear about blockoramas anymore. You hear about all different types of things. How do we bring our people together and our elderly people? Since COVID, a lot of them just don't go out. And we need to be able to organize situations and opportunities and activities that we can bring them in where they can feel safe, and at the same time, the young people can be part and parcel of it. And that is probably one way of putting a gap into that whole cultural poverty that we are talking about, that we are not passing on.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I just want to make it just an observation, and also to further contextualize the Father Reginald John lecture series. You know, one of the when we at the Pastoral Center were thinking of the planning committee to put the lecture series together, it was a response to the Archbishop's two questions. One was on how best do we engage the faithful, the people of God, with respect to the new evangelization. And the other question had to do with how can we, as communities, as parishes, as church, strengthen our engagement in terms of our faith and our practices, especially to the poor. So I guess I want to say that we need to also, let's keep in mind that, you know, when I think it was Mark who made the observation that what obtained in the first development decade, the 60s and the 70s, and the 70s and the 80s, that the young persons, the young people, live in a different context, you know? And therefore, the whole area of pastoral planning, not just pastoral planning, but we need to do it in a way that is strategic, so that we can have an impact as church. One of the weaknesses of the church's planning processes is that it has been very reactive and not proactive. So we have events, a lot of activities as church in trying to respond to the pastoral needs of young persons, but we're not doing it in a way that is strategic. Yeah? in a way that we can get some concrete results. We can measure what we are doing. And that is why the Archbishop and the other strategic planning committee that gave the mandate to the pastoral center to assist in the monitoring and the evaluation of the implementation of the Archdiocesan strategic pastoral plan for the next 5 to 10 years. I just want us to keep that in mind, that what we did at one point was good, but the economic, the cultural trends within our contemporary societies demand that we as church have to look at it with a different lens.
Thank you. One moment. Thank you. So that we don't have a part 3 for this this lecture, we will take just two more comment question or whichever, so we can bring this to an end. It means what it tells us that there is need for the discussion, there is need for the dialogue, and it has to continue beyond the lecture. If the series has spurred interest and caused persons to want now to be checking with the pastoral center, checking with the parishes as to, well, we would have achieved a major objective of the series. Okay, so 2 more comments before we bring it to a close. Yeah, no, that's what I said. So that's one.
I just want to tell you, Ezra, that personally, I'm involved with my UE Milner Hall Freedom Hall group. And what we have is not a Catholic thing, it's just a UE graduate. We have a mentorship program, and we raise money and give bursaries to students in St. Augustine. So for example, like last month, September, I was in Trinidad where I met my mentee. So I'm part of a mentorship program with St. Augustine students. Now I think probably that can be replicated with St. Mary's College students in St. Lucia. St. Joe's Convent, not just when they meet and they just meet, but we from UA Milner Hall, we have a mentorship program, So we are actually located throughout the world, and we are mentoring children, young people attend university. I think I could be part of that for St. Mary's College, in St. Lucia as a Catholic Christian.
Great. Any more questions? Okay, yes.
But just in keeping with the Reverend's comment a while ago, and also in keeping with what Mr. Sandy was talking about, the question remains, what are the entry points, the main entry points, in an effort to promote and to actuate preferential options? Now, the word is options, which means that you have a long list. There's a long list. And therefore, which among the long list is what you want to prioritize? And I'm hearing some good ideas coming from the people. But I just wanted to find out if you had any other suggestions with regards to all of these principles, because in order to get the outcome from those principles, you have to actuate, you have to plan, you have to strategize, you have to come down to results. And I think the church is, as a body, is looking for results. So this is my last question. What would be some of those key entry points that the church would like to embark on in the immediate scenario? And of course, thought can be given to what can be done for the medium term and the long term.
So is that to answer your question, is that a strategic entry point that we're asking young people to come and join CYO? I mean, Kingsley spoke about there's no CYOs. CYO was in a particular historical time. Listen to Mary and these traditional societies. Are these strategic entry points? And I would argue that they're not at this point in time. And therefore, again, going back to the whole synodal process, how do we discern as church? What is the Holy Spirit saying to us in this context? Both in terms of the renewal of our structures. So if we have structures which are dysfunctional or dead, that should not be an entry point. We have to be able to discern where is it that we can, in terms of evangelization, in terms of mission, how do we creatively, how do we think about those things? Is a process in terms of identifying strategic entry points. We have our traditional entry points, for example, in terms of Sunday Mass, where we come together to worship. That's an entry point. What do we do with our homilies? How do we relate? And it was as Bishop Malze who had made that very critical thinking in his lecture, and that is that liturgy must not just stop in the church, in the buildings of the church, but it must extend to everyday life. So all these are strategic thinking processes that we really need to bring on board, to think about it in terms of the future. Otherwise, not just the church, but other institutions that continue to use old wine, to use the biblical metaphor, old wine, right, into new skins, wineskins, and just doing the same thing over and over and over. And we're not seeing a deepening of our faith. We're not seeing the actualization of our faith experiences, especially within our context as Caribbean peoples.
Thank you, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end. I know it may not have been a natural end, but a production end for sure, of the today's session, Catholic Social Doctrine and the Church's Preferential Option for the Poor. The beginning, as I said earlier, the series is about stimulating thought, and today a lot was mentioned about the encyclicals. This is the encyclical they were speaking about, Pope Leo's own, on the condition of the working classes. And there you can, nowadays, if you are interested, you can go to Dr. Google and he will give you information left, right, and center. But for things Catholic, in terms of the various encyclicals, if you go to www.vatican.va, www.vatican.va, you will be able to get all those encyclicals, and then you can read them at your leisure. Because as the principles cover, they cover the environment. So your natural leaning may be things to the environment, your things may be to worker interest. So there is something for each and every one of you of your talent. So we really encourage you to check out that site and some. At the Pastoral Center, we have a few of those documents. For example, we have the one on the condition of the working class. It is there. When you're reading, don't expect to see too many pictures in there. It's adult reading for you to study, so we really encourage you. You have to bring your A game. So it's not something you could have your earphones in your ear and you're reading. It's study material. And this is what the lecture series is saying. And I think what many of us have been saying through in different ways is that as adult Catholics, we have to step up to the plate and do the necessary reading and gaining the information, which is readily available to know about our faith. And it will help us to become the better Christians that we are. So once again, www.vatican.va. So once again, we would like to thank Deacon Popo, Ms. Hyacinth, and Mr. Raphael St. Hill for their contributions to this panel discussion. Let us give them a round of applause once again. Before we sign off, as usual, we solicit your assistance in spreading the word and letting others know about today's panel discussion. By now, most of you should know, but in case you may have forgotten or genuinely didn't know, this lecture and the previous lectures in the Father Reginald John lecture series can be viewed and reviewed on the Archdiocese of Castray's YouTube channel and Facebook pages. Finally, on behalf of the board, management, and staff of the Pastoral Center, I would like to thank our sponsors, Domino Pizzas, Janu Credit Union, Cox and Company. We really want to say a heartfelt thanks to them for coming on board with us. We want to thank those of you who took the time to be with us in person for this lecture, those of you who will view it online, and most important, those of you who continue to provide us with feedback on the lectures, as the only way we can improve and make things better is if you give us feedback. Yes, Monsignor.
As part of the church's continuing response, its preferential option for the poor, I would like us to invite everyone to support the St. Lucy's Home. On the 24th of November, we have our annual fundraiser. We've not been able to have it because of COVID, but this is where one of the particular cases where the preferential option for the poor is tangibly manifested. We take street persons, homeless persons, we take them, we feed them, we clothe them, we bury them, totally responsible. And we get no financial support except donations. Government gives us a small subsidy, but it's all based on donation. So by assisting, by helping with this dinner, you are participating in this process of preferential option for the poor. So 24th of November at the Kubaril, there's a fundraising dinner. It's only $150 per ticket, and of course, that's your contribution. We have outstanding prices like a cruise for two, several other prices. So show your preferential option report in action by supporting our dinner.
Okay, thank you. Well, you heard it. There's no need for me to add any more. But again, these are concrete ways in which we manifest our preferential option for the poor. Finally, if you have any need to contact us at the Pastoral Center, if you have donations to make to the Pastoral Center, if you have questions to ask to the Pastoral Center, you can contact us at 452-0790. Once again, thank you and God bless.